VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker here on a solo trip on this Wednesday, February 12th. We are less than 4 weeks from NFL free agency, and as of mid-February, the Vikings have, about $60 million in cap space, and it's awesome that way because usually in the last half decade, a little bit more, the Vikings enter this point of the calendar in the red, where you're like, oh, they're at negative $8 million. They have to restructure contracts just to sign newcomers and existing free agents. This year is different. Before restructuring anybody, the Vikings start off with about $60 million, which means it should be their most exciting free agency in terms of spending in a very long time, maybe dating back to the pre-Kirk Cousins era. So I want to get this out in the open. We have talked a lot in bits and pieces about J.J. McCarthy. And most folks, including myself, that are on this show, whether it's a guest or a host like me, we fully endorse the J.J. McCarthy era, and I would have endorsed the damn thing last year if he didn't tore his meniscus. So I, of course, carry that over to this season, and although we do nibble at it in bits and pieces, I want to do a show specifically reserved for the case for J.J. McCarthy in case there's anybody on the fence. And, this is while silly rumors, in my opinion, are swirling about Aaron Rodgers. He should complete the historical cycle with Brett Favre because he's going to leave the Jets. And then there's Matthew Stafford trade rumors. Evidently, Stafford's wife got in front of a microphone and said, this guy should probably be traded or we wouldn't be mad about a trade because he wants to win now. All that's fantastic. If we didn't have J.J. McCarthy on the roster, I'd fully understand all of these trade rumors. But you don't. You have McCarthy on the roster. Why are we doing this Rodgers and Stafford old guy stuff? We've done this for most of our adult lives, kid lives in general. As Vikings fans going through retread quarterbacks, and it works to an extent, but it never gets a Super Bowl. And that's one of the primary reasons. But I'm going to go systematically down the line as to why it is time to start the J.J. McCarthy era without Sam Darnold on the roster. And it shouldn't be that big of a debate. It should be pretty cut and dried. So I've got about 6-7 reasons here, and I'm going to go through them. At the very top of the list, in my opinion, the reason that you start the J.J. McCarthy era right now, not next year, not the year after that, is the salary cap. I just got done giving a miniature speech about how they have $60 million to spend. Well, if they re-sign Sam Darnold, that son of a gun is going to get $35 million to $40 million per season, undebatably. Some team's going to give him that because the guy threw for 35 touchdowns. And I'm here to report to you that if the Vikings are the team that says, you know what, we want to have it safe from all angles, we want both McCarthy and Darnold, and let's say they give him something like 2 years, $75 million or something like that. You are right back to the Kirk Cousins era of roster construction, team building, and budgeting. No delineation whatsoever. Fans got frustrated by Kirk Cousins making $35 million per season, and that wasn't even top-tier money. That was like 8th most in the NFL, and people bitched all high heavens because Cousins, in their opinion, couldn't drag them to the playoffs by himself. And now we'd be going to do that with Darnold. And is there really that much difference between prime Kirk Cousins and prime Sam Darnold? No, there's not. Sam Darnold absolutely face-planted in the season's final 2 games. So my problem with, let's play it safe, let's keep Darnold around, is the salary cap is you'd pay that guy his $37, $38 million, and then your cap space dwindles to half immediately. You still have 24 other in-house free agents to sign, and then we are right back to where we were, hoping that we can restructure contracts, push money into the future to go out and sign players like Marcus Davenport, Jonathan Grenard, and not necessarily bargain bin free agents, but you would lose this precious moment of being able to embark on a bonanza of spending. And the reason that McCarthy was drafted, 10 months ago now, was it allowed you that era of a quarterback on a rookie contract for 5 years. And if they dink around and say, we want Darnold back, then boom, there goes year number 4. That's off the books. Then you're down to a 3-year window that when McCarthy is, we think, ready to start in 2026, you got to hurry up and win the championship in 3 years before McCarthy turns around and asks for a giant contract. So as it stands, even though it was disappointing that McCarthy tore his meniscus and missed the entire season, the window of 5 years to get it right shrunk to 4. If you sign Darnold back, you're down to 3. So you just have this precious moment in time where you can get away with a quarterback for cheap in McCarthy while building out the roster with defensive players, probably a running back, and trying to go win a Super Bowl. Adding Darnold back in any capacity, even if you say, hey, we're going to backload this contract, we're going to sign him for 2 years, $75 million, but that money's going to kick in 2027, 2028, exact same thing we did during the Cousins era, and you're going to have to pay the piper eventually. So the salary cap, in my opinion, screams for a rookie quarterback because we have done this thing with Cousins where you pay a good but not elite quarterback pretty decent cash and hope for the best. They even did that with Darnold, even though they employed that strategy with Darnold at $10 million. It got him 14 wins and a one and done in the postseason. So above all else, the salary cap says it's time to do McCarthy. The next one is McCarthy's upside versus whatever you consider Darnold. The Vikings drafted J.J. McCarthy 10th overall last April because in their perception and fans' perception, he can be the Vikings version of Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, or if he's not quite that good, then Dak Prescott, a top 12 quarterback. And it's the upside that you're investing in with a top 10 pick. You hope that he can transform into something that's better than Kirk Cousins was for 6 years, and then better than Darnold was ever or in 2024. Right now, if you're a Vikings fan that wants Sam Darnold back, fine. But you have to hope that his faceplant against the Lions and against the Rams was just one big accident. Not going to happen again, folks. He got that out of his system. And we, as Vikings fans and writers and YouTube show hosts, you'd have to wait a full year because I can guarantee you Darnold's going to play great at training camp. He's going to look like a madman in preseason and then probably ball out again in the regular season. Vikings get to the postseason, and then we wait a full year to figure out, all right, now is he going to collapse again in the postseason? I don't have the patience for that, and I don't think the Vikings should have the patience for that when you have McCarthy there ready in the waiting. So we kind of already know Sam Darnold's upside. He was a quasi-bust for the first, 6 seasons of his career. He rejuvenated completely with the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell, and then he looked like a bust-worthy quarterback again when it mattered the most. So you see that upside is kind of topped out. Now, for his sake, hopefully he exercises all those demons, comes back, looks like a baller in some playoff game for some team. But the Vikings don't have time to wait around and wait to see if he can, get good in the postseason. You have McCarthy's right now, whose upside is pristine. It's not sullied by a collapse against the Lions at Ford Field. And the whole reason that you get a guy from round one of the draft is maybe this guy can be our franchise quarterback. We know what we have in Darnold, 6 years of blah, and then 1 year of majesty, but a one and done in the postseason. With McCarthy, you hope you can get the whole package. The next one is the ugly Sam Darnold truth. There's no other way to put it. The guy collapsed, and there's no other explanation. And then there's that waiting game. That's the thing that bugs me the most is I don't think the Vikings have time for that trial. It's way too long. Because I already know he's going to play well in the regular season. That's fine. And you have to ask yourself in your heart of hearts. So the guy got a raw deal with the Jets, and then he got a raw deal with the Panthers, and then he couldn't win QB1 with San Francisco. Is he the most misunderstood guy that there is? Or all of these detriments of his, flamed out with the Jets, didn't work out with the Panthers, I guess had a decent QB2 stint with the 49ers, got to the Vikings, played well, and then convinced everybody that he was who they thought he was in the postseason. The guy, I think, is a top 16 quarterback when he's at his best, but I just don't think that we're going to see him morph into a top 5 guy. So there's that ugly truth that we've probably seen the best from Sam Darnold. And it was great at times, don't get me wrong. But the goal is to find a quarterback who doesn't absolutely capitulate when the season's on the line in the postseason. So I think there is that ugly Darnold truth that he has peaked. And now he'll spend the rest of his career trying to throw 35 touchdowns and 4,319 passing yards for the Raiders or the Rams or the Seahawks, and then waiting for that grand crescendo in the postseason to show, hey, remember that game against the Rams in Arizona when I looked like shit? That's not going to happen again. Then there's the element of the plan all along, starting in 2022, from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, was to gradually offload aging veteran contracts for the Vikings. Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, Eric Kendricks. There was more. Danielle Hunter wasn't a aging contract, but they basically swapped him for Jonathan Grenard. But there was the competitive rebuild that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah carefully constructed, patiently constructed. So the plan all along was to get rid of the old players who were making a lot of money, rebuild this franchise, draft J.J. McCarthy, and then let her rip for 5 seasons. Now it's down to 4 because McCarthy was hurt. And team build be around the quarterback. In 5 years, 2029, we'll have to do what the Chiefs are doing right now, what the Bills are doing right now, assuming McCarthy is good. You're going to have to pay McCarthy at that time $70 million if he's a top 10 guy, and then try team building the other way. And the Vikings did that with Cousins for 6 years. The plan all along was to try it an alternative way, which was get the rookie quarterback and then go sign Grenards and Van Ginkels. Hopefully this offseason it's Javon Hollins and DJ Reeds and Drew Dahlmans. Rolling back with Darnold, you're not going to be able to do that. You're hopping right back into the Cousins era. So if you stay committed to the plan, which Kwesi Adofo-Mensah began in 2022, that would be committing to your rookie quarterback, hell or high water. And do you really think that J.J. McCarthy is going to be the one quarterback that Kevin O'Connell can't work with and squeeze the best out of? Why on earth would McCarthy be that guy? So the plan all along says we're going to competitive rebuild, roll with our quarterback of the future for the choosing, who was 21 years old at the time we drafted him. And I think that time is now to let it play out. 2 more here on why the Vikings should start McCarthy. You have the loyalty angle. This team prides itself on culture, and this is the spot where players want to be. It always ranks in the top 2 for the NFL's Players Association report card for everything, like facilities, culture, coaches, ownership. And it would be kind of disloyal to say to J.J. McCarthy, you know that whole sales pitch we gave you right after the draft that you are our guy? Well, we have Sam Darnold now, and even though he sucked in the postseason, we're trading you, my friend, to the Raiders. Or you're going to have to sit your ass on the bench and wait while we hope that Darnold doesn't disappoint us again. I think there is an element of keeping your word to McCarthy that with Darnold, if Darnold got to the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl, everything is different. But he didn't. He did the opposite. He lost in the first game. So I think you have to, recommit to your loyalty to McCarthy because you invested in him in the first round. And to say, we're going to keep Darnold over you, there'd be an element of, going back on your word for Darnold, a guy who was good but not great, and he proved it when the lights were the brightest. And finally, and this might be the most basic one, for the Vikings, it is time to do things differently. We have spent so long, my goodness, probably since the end of the Tommy Kramer era, cycling through veteran quarterbacks that left other teams, whether it's Jim McMahon, Warren Moon, Jeff George, Randall Cunningham, all of these guys that the Vikings have had pretty fantastic regular seasons. It's using somebody else's quarterback. Case Keenum, Kirk Cousins, Darnold this year. It only gets you so far. And there's no Super Bowls involved. And that's the only thing that, any Vikings fans want is the cliche one before they die or whatever, however it's said. So it's time to switch things up. They tried it with Teddy Bridgewater. Of course, that guy's leg almost fell off one summer day in 2016. But going to find a veteran quarterback in free agency, hoping to squeeze the life out of him, squeeze the good prime production of, hey, let's get Brett Favre in 2009. He did great, but it just never quite works all the way out to a championship. And because we're fresh off the steam of 6 seasons of Kirk Cousins and now 1 of Sam Darnold, you're always trying to win a Super Bowl with somebody you didn't draft. And it's time to do it the other way. When you watch these teams like the Patriots all those years, recently the Chiefs, and they're even the teams that are there at the end recently, like the Bills and the Ravens, the Eagles, they're doing it with the quarterback that they drafted and developed. The Vikings need to try that way and see if they can develop McCarthy into a top 10, top 8, top 5 guy, rather than, you know what, we like Sam Darnold because he looked pretty good this season. It's time to find your guy, which you've already done through a process last year, and develop him. It has not worked for my entire life, and a lot of your life, all of your life, of using somebody else's quarterback. In fact, the best era of Vikings football was in the 1970s when Fran Tarkenton was the quarterback, and you guessed it, he was the guy that they found, and they, got to 3 or 4 Super Bowls, although Joe Kapp was the leader of one of them. So shake it up, do it differently. It has never worked just to find some veteran retread quarterback. Give McCarthy a whirl. All right, that's all I got. We'll be back later this week. Getting really close to free agency, folks. Skol, baby.